every choice that your character makes in any one of your scenes should reveal something about what they believe, either about themselves, about the world, about what matters most to them, about what they fear, things like that. And this is what's going to help you connect your individual scenes to your character's larger arc.
Welcome to the Fiction Writing Made Easy podcast. My name is Savannah Gilbo, and I'm here to help you write a story that works. I want to prove to you that writing a novel doesn't have to be overwhelming. So each week, I'll bring you a brand new episode with simple, actionable, and step-by-step strategies that you can implement in your writing right away. So whether you're brand new to writing or more of a seasoned author looking to improve your craft, this podcast is for you. So pick up a pen and let's get started.
In today's episode, we're talking about how to write solid, compelling scenes, specifically the 5 key elements every scene needs to actually work. Now, here's the thing. There are a lot of scene structure methods out there. You have StoryGrid's 5 Commandments, Dwight Swain's Scene and Sequel, James Scott Bell's Lock System, and so many more. And if you've tried to learn how to write a scene from multiple sources, you might feel like everyone's teaching something different. But spoiler, they are not. When you strip away all the terminology, every method is actually pointing toward the same key elements. And once you understand what those elements are, you can use any framework or no framework at all and write scenes that actually work. So that is what we're covering today. And by the end of this episode, you'll understand the mechanics behind all the different methods, and you'll know exactly what you need to include in every scene so you can write and revise with confidence. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you know that I love talking about scenes, and that's because they are truly mini stories. And once you understand how they work, then writing your entire draft gets so much easier. I've done episodes on the topic of writing scenes before, but it's been about 5 years since I did a real deep dive on scene structure. And honestly, I've learned a lot since then, both how to teach this and how to help writers troubleshoot when their scenes aren't working. So I wanted to revisit this topic with fresh eyes and walk you through exactly how it all works. Now, real quick before we dive in, I made you a free guide that goes along with this episode that includes everything we're going to talk about today. There's an example from a scene in the Hunger Games so you can see all 5 of the elements we're going to talk through in action, and I've included a 1-page scene planner that you can print out and use every time you sit down to write a new scene. You can go grab that for free at savannahgilbo.com/scene. One more time, that's savannahgilbo.com/scene. All right, so without further ado, let's dive right in. And I actually want to start by defining what a scene is, and maybe more importantly, what a scene is not. So what is a scene? Well, a scene is a unit of story where something changes. So your character walks in wanting one thing, and they walk out in a different place, whether that's emotionally, physically, or relationally. It happens in real time from one character's perspective, unless you're using an omniscient narrator, and it moves the global story forward. If nothing changes by the end, then you don't have a scene, you have filler or something that needs to be developed into a scene. So something needs to change, and not just any change counts. It has to be meaningful within the context of your bigger story. So, for example, a character going from hungry to full isn't a meaningful change unless, of course, that's what your story is about. But a character who trusts someone at the beginning of a scene and doubts them by the end, well, that shift sounds more like something that matters, again, if trust is central to that character's arc. So the question isn't just, did something change? It's, does this change move my character closer to or further from what they want and need, and or what's at stake in my story? In other words, does this scene's arc of change impact the global story or not? All right, now speaking of that, and just to be super clear, let's talk about what a scene is not. A scene is not lengthy descriptions of the setting, the weather, or what everyone's wearing. A scene is not characters sitting around reflecting, musing, processing, or catching up without any tension or conflict driving the conversation. A scene is not random events or action sequences that don't force your character to make meaningful choices. A scene is not paragraphs of backstory explaining why your character is the way they are. And a scene is not explanations of your world's history, magic system, or lore that aren't filtered through your character's immediate needs. Now, can you have description, reflection, or backstory within a scene? Absolutely you can. But those things do not make a scene on their own. They need to exist in service of that scene's arc of change and or the overarching story's arc of change. All right, so that is what a scene is, and like I said, maybe more importantly, what a scene is not. Now, let's dive into the 5 key elements that every scene needs, because no matter which method you follow, writing a compelling and well-structured scene boils down to including these 5 things. Number 1 is a point of view character with a clear scene goal. Now, unless you're using an omniscient narrator to tell your story, a scene should follow one point of view character who is pursuing a clear and specific goal. So before you write any scene in your novel, I want you to ask yourself, what does this particular character want to achieve, obtain, or avoid in this scene? And whatever the answer is, this is their goal, and it needs to be established early, ideally within the first few paragraphs. And this is really, really important because if your character doesn't have a scene goal, then there's going to be nothing driving your scene forward. And that's where you're going to run into issues. Now, your character's scene goal doesn't have to be something super dramatic. It just needs to be clear. And what makes a scene goal really powerful is when your character wants something while trying to avoid something else. So they want X without Y. A few examples of this could be something like a character who wants to get information without revealing how much they already know, or a character who wants to keep the peace without compromising their values, or a character who wants to win someone's trust without being vulnerable themselves. So they want X without Y. And this X without Y lens is going to help you generate conflict that feels really organic to your character rather than conflict that's just manufactured to fill up the pages. So again, before you write any scene, I want you to get clear on your character's goal, so the specific thing they want in this scene and the thing they're trying to avoid. And that tension is going to help you create the engine of everything that follows. So that is key element number 1, a point of view character with a clear scene goal. Now, key element number 2 is a scene antagonist with an agenda. And a scene antagonist is just whoever opposes your point of view character's goal in that specific scene. So this doesn't have to be your story's main antagonist. This doesn't mean that they need to be present in every single scene. It's just whoever is opposing your point of view character's goal in this specific scene. And this could be anyone. It could be a friend who disagrees with your point of view character, a mentor who pushes back, or a love interest with a conflicting agenda. So again, it doesn't have to be your story's main antagonist, although it certainly can be. It's just whoever opposes your point of view character's goal in that specific scene. So here's the key difference. A broken down car isn't a scene antagonist. It's just an inconvenience or an obstacle. But a character who refuses to lend your point of view character their car because of an old grudge, that's conflict with intention, and that would be your scene antagonist. So when you're planning a scene, I want you to ask yourself, who is opposing my character's goal in this moment? And just as importantly, what does that person want and why? And this part is key because the best scene antagonists aren't just there to block your point of view character. They are characters with their own agendas that just so happen to collide with your point of view characters in this scene. So as an example, think about Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in that scene where Harry gets sorted into Gryffindor. Harry's goal during that scene is to be placed into his Hogwarts house, and he makes it super clear he wants to be in any house except Slytherin. Now, the Sorting Hat actually plays the role of the scene antagonist here because its agenda is to place Harry where he'll reach his greatest potential, and the Sorting Hat believes that that could very well be Slytherin. So although they both want to find the best fit for Harry, they have opposing ideas on what this looks like. So in this example, the Sorting Hat is acting as the scene antagonist. Now, thinking of an example from a totally different genre, in Pride and Prejudice, there's a scene towards the end of the book or the movie, whichever one you're more familiar with, where Lady Catherine visits Elizabeth and she demands that Elizabeth refuse Darcy's potential proposal. So in that scene, Lady Catherine's agenda is to protect her family's status and to ensure that Darcy marries her own daughter instead of Elizabeth. Elizabeth's goal is to maintain her autonomy and not be bullied into a promise that she doesn't want to make. So in this example, Lady Catherine is acting as the scene antagonist. Now, in a completely different type of story, think about something like Dune and the scene where Paul Atreides is tested by Reverend Mother Mohayim with the Gom Jabbar, or a poison needle that's being held to his neck as he undergoes intense pain that the Reverend Mother is inflicting on him. Paul's goal in this scene is to survive whatever the Reverend Mother is doing, and the Reverend Mother's agenda is to determine whether Paul can override instinct with willpower, and if he can't, she's going to kill him. So in this example, the Reverend Mother is the scene antagonist. All right, now notice in each of these examples, the scene antagonist isn't necessarily evil. They have their own goals, and for the most part, they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. The Sorting Hat wants the best for Harry, Lady Catherine is protecting her family, and the Reverend Mother is carrying out a test that she believes is necessary. So what they want simply gets in the way of what the protagonist wants, and that collision of agendas is what's going to help you create strong, organic feeling conflict in each one of your scenes. So that is key element number 2. You want to have a scene antagonist with an agenda. All right, now moving on to key element number 3. The third thing you'll want to make sure you have in every single one of your scenes is escalating conflict with a turning point. So as your character pursues their scene goal, the obstacles are going to pile up. The situation's going to get harder, the stakes get higher, and the scene antagonist will keep pushing back. This is where that X without Y tension that you set up in the character's scene goal really starts to tighten and put pressure on them. And that's because your character is trying to thread the needle. So they're trying to get what they want without facing what they're avoiding. But with each obstacle they face, that needle gets harder to thread. And so eventually they're going to hit a moment where they can no longer continue on their original path. This is called the scene's turning point, and it's the moment when something shifts and your character realizes they can't keep doing what they've been doing. And a turning point could be anything. It could be a piece of information that changes everything, an action from the scene antagonist that forces a response, or a moment where the character's strategy to get X without facing Y falls apart completely. So for example, in the Hunger Games, think about the scene where Katniss sets out to find Rue after Rue fails to show up at their meeting point. Katniss is moving through enemy territory, and her goal is really to find Rue without exposing herself to the career tributes. But when she hears Rue scream, that strategy falls apart, and so Katniss yells her name and she sprints into the clearing, abandoning any thought of staying hidden. So at that point, she can't find Rue and stay safe at the same time. She has to choose one or the other, and she chooses to go help Rue. So that's the turning point moment within that scene. The moment that Katniss's find Rue without being seen strategy is no longer an option. All right, so that is key element number 3. There needs to be escalating conflict that peaks in a turning point. And however this happens, what's important to remember is that something has to give. And that's what leads us directly into the next key element, which is key element number 4, a tough decision with something at stake. Now, after the turning point, your character faces a choice. They've been trying to get what they want without paying the price, but now that is no longer possible. So what are they going to do? Well, they either have to pay the price to get what they want, or they can abandon what they wanted altogether. So I'll say that again. They either have to pay the price to get what they wanted, or they can abandon what they wanted altogether. Now, this is really important. Either way, both options need to cost them something. So if they choose option 1, what do they stand to lose or what do they stand to gain? If they choose option 2, what do they stand to lose or what do they stand to gain? And again, this is really important because a decision without stakes isn't really a decision. It's more like a fork in the road, right? Now, this part of the scene is really important because this is where you're going to reveal who your character really is. And that's because we define ourselves by the decisions we make under pressure. So every choice that your character makes in any one of your scenes should reveal something about what they believe, either about themselves, about the world, about what matters most to them, about what they fear, things like that. And this is what's going to help you connect your individual scenes to your character's larger arc. So think about it this way. Early in your story, your character might have made choices driven by some kind of flawed belief or inner obstacle. But later, as they grow and change, their choices are going to start to shift and change. And that shift or that change, scene by scene, is how you show real character growth and change on the page. So really, really important. Now, after this, once your character is faced with this tough decision, they need to make a choice and or take action. So they can't just think about what they want to do, they have to commit and actually do something. And yes, this decision needs to show up on the page through what they say or what they do. And it's really important that your point of view character is the one making this choice. That's because if someone else is always deciding the way forward, so another character swooping in or an external event is solving the problem for your protagonist, then your protagonist loses their agency. And when your protagonist loses their agency, your reader is going to lose their investment. All right, so even in scenes where the situation feels out of your character's control, I want you to find a way to give them a meaningful choice within those constraints. And I know that sounds tough, but I also know that you can find a way to do it. All right, now as an example to bring this element to life, think about the scene in Six of Crows where Inej is captured. We know that Kaz has spent the entire heist and really the entire story protecting his emotional walls. But once Inej is captured, he faces an impossible choice. He can either let her go and continue to protect himself emotionally, or he can rescue her and reveal just how much she means to him. And the kicker here is that he doesn't just decide internally, he acts on his decision and he goes after her. That action shows readers who he is, it cracks his armor, and it changes the dynamic between Kaz and Inej for the rest of the series. All right, now making a choice isn't the end of your scene, it's what happens next that gives that choice meaning. So key element number 5 is that there are consequences with forward momentum. So the final element here is the result of your character's choice and their reaction to it. So what happens because of their decision? How do they feel about it? Do they feel relieved, regretful, more determined, completely shaken, right? Like, how do they feel about this choice they just made? And this moment really matters because it shows us the weight of what just happened. And remember what I said earlier, a choice without consequences is going to feel hollow. So this moment in the aftermath of your character's decision, it shows us the weight of what happened and how they're reacting to it. It's also what's going to help you create forward momentum into your next scene. So your point of view character made a decision in this scene, they face consequences, and now they have to figure out what comes next. All right, so you might have heard me say this on a previous episode of the podcast, but you want to be able to link each of your scenes through cause and effect. So at the end of each scene, you want to ask yourself, because of what happened in this scene, what must happen next? And that chain from scene to scene or from cause to effect, that's what holds your entire story together. So again, really, really important. Now, as an example of this, think about the TV show Breaking Bad and think about the scene where Walter White decides that he is going to cook meth with Jesse Pinkman. And he's going to do this as a way to provide for his family after he's gone. So this is a decision that he makes in one of the scenes, and the consequences of this decision in that scene flow directly into the next one because now they actually have to do it. So they actually have to come together and cook meth. And in the bigger story, Walt is committed to this new business venture for better or worse. So he made a decision in this scene, and in the very next, we see him get into action on that decision. All right, so that is the 5th key element you want to make sure is in each of your scenes, and that is consequences with forward momentum. Now, I want to quickly recap what those 5 elements were, but don't go anywhere because there's one more thing I want to talk about that brings all of these elements together. So the first key element was a single point of view character with a clear and specific scene goal. So before you write a single word, make sure you know what your character wants in this scene. Remember, it doesn't have to be dramatic, it just has to be clear. So ask yourself, what does my character want in this scene and what are they trying to avoid? That tension will help you generate organic conflict right off the bat. Then I want you to identify your scene antagonist. So who is going to oppose your point of view character's goal? And remember, you want to make sure that your antagonist has their own agenda and they're not just there to create conflict for conflict's sake. After that, I want you to increase the conflict, obstacles, and pressure until your character can't keep going forward the way they planned. So ask yourself, what event or realization makes your point of view character's original scene goal and their strategy for achieving it impossible? After that, you'll want to force a decision with real stakes. So make your point of view character choose a way forward and make sure both options feel equal in weight. And remember, you'll want to show them acting on their choice, not just thinking about it. Lastly, you'll want to show the consequences of that choice. So even if it's just a very quick moment of reaction, let us see how their choice lands and make sure it creates forward momentum into your next scene. Now, those 5 elements give you the structure of a working scene, but there's one more thing that makes the difference between a scene that just works and a scene that actually moves people, and that is letting readers inside your character's head. So throughout your entire scene, not just at the end, readers need access to how your character is processing what's happening. When the conflict escalates, we need to feel the character's dread or frustration tightening. When the turning point hits, we need to experience their realization in real time. When they face that tough decision, we need to feel the weight of it before they act. This is what we call interiority, and it's your character's thoughts, feelings, opinions, and private reactions on the page. And it's what makes novels uniquely powerful as a form of storytelling. Now, I wanted to mention this because roughly 80 to 90% of the manuscripts I've edited were all lacking interiority. So the structure might be there, the scenes might work, the overall story structure might work, but the reader can't feel any of it because they don't have access to what the character is thinking and feeling as everything unfolds. So as you work through the 5 elements we talked about in this episode, remember that structure is the skeleton of your scene, and your character's inner life is what puts flesh on those bones and makes readers actually care about what happens. Every action in your scene needs a reaction from your character, not just physical ones, but emotional and psychological too. Now, before I share my final thoughts, I just want to remind you that there is a free guide that goes along with today's episode that includes all the elements we talked about today, including how they show up in a scene from the Hunger Games. I've also included a printable 1-page scene planner that you can use to map out the scenes in your own story. So to grab that for free, go to savannahgilbo.com/scene. One more time, that's savannahgilbo.com/scene. All right, so where does all of this leave you? Well, I hope you can see that although there are dozens of scene structure methods and frameworks out there, you don't need to master all of them. You just need to understand what they're all trying to teach you, and that is how to write a scene where something changes. You have a character who wants something, an opposing force that gets in the way, escalating conflict that reaches a peak, a choice that reveals character, and consequences that ripple into the next scene, all filtered through the rich inner life of your point of view character. That's it. That's what every scene writing method is built on. If you want a shorthand version, just remember goal, conflict, decision, and consequences. That's the engine of every working scene. And once you see that, the method you use stops mattering so much because you understand what's actually making your scenes work. All right, so my challenge to you is to pick a scene from your work in progress, run it through these elements, and see what you find. You might be surprised how quickly you can spot exactly what's missing.
All right, so that's it for this episode of the Fiction Writing Made Easy podcast. Head over to savannahgilbo.com/podcast for the complete show notes, including the resources I mentioned today, as well as bonus materials to help you implement what you've learned. And if you're ready to get more personalized guidance for your specific writing stage, whether you're just starting out, stuck somewhere in the middle of a draft, drowning in revisions, or getting ready to publish, take my free 30-second quiz at savannahgilbo.com/quiz. You'll get a customized podcast playlist that'll meet you right where you're at and help you get to your next big milestone. Last but not least, make sure to follow this podcast in your podcast player of choice because I'll be back next week with another episode full of actionable tips, tools, and strategies to help you become a better writer. Until then, happy writing.